Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this extraordinary Q&A opportunity. I'm very excited about this. My name's Edith Bowman, and it's a real honour to be part and asked to be involved in the Bridport Film Festival. And I love the opportunity to talk about that journey from page to screen. And for me, this feels like a wonderful and quite a unique opportunity to talk about that journey from page to screen, because we are joined by the author of the Guantanamo Diaries and the director of the film, The Mauritanian, that the film is based on the book, joining us. So please welcome Mohamedou Ould Slahi and Kevin Macdonald. Hello, gents.
Hello, very nice to be here in Wales.
Thank you for being. Thank you both for being here. I mean, Kevin, first of all, I'm a big fan of the film. I think what you've done with this is absolutely such a physical and emotional experience. Mohamedu, it is an honor to get the chance to talk to you. I guess starting off as well, I should say quickly as well, if you have any questions that you would like to throw to Kevin or Mohamedu, please get those in on the Q&A function, and I'll get through as many as I can at the end, but I'm selfishly going to start. It might be a strange place to start, but Mohamedu, I'd really like to know what your reaction was when you saw the finished film.
At first, I was very scared when I was watching it. It's like, like very scared, very tense.
Yeah.
And then I had to scroll, like go through the torture scene. So it's very tight at the end because it's
Oh, you have to introduce our guest to us before we move on. Hello,
Ahmed, my son.
Hello, Ahmed. How are you?
He wants me to give him water.
He wants you to play.
Ahmed, this is Eddie.
Hello.
This is Kevin. This is
Hello,
Eddie.
little man.
Okay.
He features in the film. He's got at the very end of the film. There's a picture of
this is the film.
And Mohamedu.
Yeah.
He's
fun.
Look at
yeah,
that.
exactly. He's beautiful.
Of Kevin.
He's like, give me a role in your next film, Kevin.
You need some of my hair.
Oh, wow, that's very emotional to see him in person as well. You know, knowing your story and seeing your son. That's a wonderful thing to see. But yeah, you were saying, so your reaction to watching the film, you were a bit scared to start with.
Yeah, very scared because of many things, because there is an embarrassment as a human being, like your life is exposed, and then the very traumatic scenes, I didn't want to see them because that's not what I wanted to see.
Yeah.
Then I had to do like this and then watch through, then skip the torture scene.
Yeah.
And but it was beautifully done. I'm very satisfied.
Can you remember back, Mohamedu, what was we have Nancy played by the brilliant Jodie Foster in the film, and Nancy obviously being a real person in your life. And what was the catalyst? What was the kind of the final thing that encouraged you to write down your story?
So I really, when I was a child, I liked to write, diaries and remarks in my like copybooks, and I just keep writing stuff, random stuff, and in high school, this teacher, Arabic teacher said I need to consider like pursuing like a literary career, but I chose math career because it was easier, because it's everything known, but writing is very unknown and very like tricky. And I want to tell my story because my story was told by people who didn't mean me well. And then I start to steal, like, because I wasn't allowed to have paper and pen, and then I start to steal, and borrow and not give back, and then write, random stuff in Arabic, French, German. Very little in English, just to learn the language. And it was taken away from me. But when Nancy came, I saw my window, because I know that I could send her letters, and at least they cannot destroy them. That's at least they cannot destroy them, because they took my stuff and they took it away for good. And just I start, like writing. And I give her a summary. She told me to keep writing. And then in 3 months, I start July, September. I sent her my story. I wanted my story to be told. I don't want anyone to tell my story. I want to say it myself.
I can't imagine what it felt like to relive your experience whilst you were still in it as well. In terms of you were still there, you were still in captivity, and you were retelling your story on paper. But did you find sort of almost a comfort in it in a way? Was it helpful?
Absolutely. Look, just imagine that someone like tape your mouth and bind your hands and feet and take you to the biggest, like most popular square in I don't know, London, the biggest place over there. And then they just kept saying, this woman is a horrible criminal. She's responsible for so many deaths. She's responsible for so many destruction. And then you cannot speak and you cannot explain yourself. Day in, day out, they keep taking you out of your room and put you on display and saying all this awful stuff. When someone and say you can defend yourself, you can write it, But it's tricky too, because what right can only first read by the person who is responsible for your misery. And they can decide what to give the people who are watching, you going through this. It was very important,
Yeah.
A shout in the dark, as they say in English.
Kevin, what was your first introduction to Mohamedou's story? How were you first?
Well, I first became aware of it when the book was published in 2015. So Mohamedou was still in prison. I didn't read it. I read some extracts that were in The Guardian, and I read some reviews of the book. I thought it sounded fascinating, but I didn't read it. And then about sometime in 2017, after Mohamedou had been out for a short time, because he got out in 2016, I was called up by the publisher of the book in the UK, someone called Jamie Bing at Canongate Books, and who is a sort of old friend of mine. And he said, I want to send you this book. I think you'd be a great director for it. And a couple of producers, an American producer called Lloyd Levin and the Benedict Cumberbatch's company here in the UK, had optioned the rights. I read the book. I thought it was fascinating. And the first thing I should say, which relates to what Mohamedou has been saying, is that, as you can already tell from the way that he talks and the way the metaphors come to his mind, he's a born writer. You can read his book, and it's not just an incredible piece of history and testimony from inside this prison and a just depiction of his experience, but also it's a piece of art. And particularly when I read the introduction to the second edition of the book, which was unredacted, which is, after he got out, he replaced all the bits that the Americans had censored. And there's a new introduction to the book, which is absolutely beautiful, and which obviously he'd been able to write in the comfort of his home and edit, and which he hadn't been able to do with the first book. He'd just written it one draft and sent it off, and he wasn't able to see any proofs, so wasn't able to be involved in the editing. But anyway, it's a long story to say that I read the book. I thought it was amazing. I didn't know what to do with it as a film, because it doesn't really take a film form, and there aren't any, you know, recurring characters really apart from him. There's people come and go, different characters come and go, and that's very hard to make in a film. And it was only when I spoke to him on Skype that, and we, you know, discussed his experience, that I really grasped what the film should be, which is, you know, about him and about centered on his character and showing the world who he is and what he'd been through. And so the rest of the time with the writers was figuring out, how do we do that? How do we do that in a way which is going to be truthful to his story, but is also going to be watchable as a film and enjoyable as a film in a sense, because, you know, a film has to have some entertainment value to it. So that was a big challenge, and we went through several writers had a go at it. We went through different approaches, and the film that we've ended up with is the story of him and the publication of the book, but it also has other stories. It has Nancy Hollander, the lawyer's story. It has Stuart Couch, who's the prosecuting lawyer's story. So it's probably, you know, it's got 50% of it, I would say, is not from the original book, is not, you know, from, you know, since we're here to talk about book to screen.
Yeah.
50% of it is not that. 50% of it is the wider story.
And was that, in terms of the idea, Mohamedu, of your story being made into a film, was that something that you were interested in straight away, or did it take a bit of time and a bit of persuasion for, I guess, for that trust to be there, in terms of, you know, you said that you had to write it because you wanted to tell your story. This is your story, but still someone else telling it. So I imagine, was the trust there immediately, or was that something that you had to work on or find?
You know, when you hit rock bottom, you can only get better. So there is no lie. You know, there is in a German saying, "Die Qual der Wahl." You know, meaning the torture of too many choices. You know, like, especially like, and this is like, I'm saying this in a positive way, not in a bashing way. You know, especially in this like Western culture, where people achieved so much prosperity. You know, they have enough food, they have enough clothes, they have enough everything, they have freedom, everything. They have choices. I want this, I don't want this. I didn't have any choice. I had one lawyer. I have to love that lawyer, accept my lawyer. You know, and I have film, I have to accept, you know, that film, and everything I welcome, you know, everything I welcome, that I'm so happy, and everything turned perfect, nearly perfect, everything, you know. And it's not like I'm in Hollywood. I'm not like in Kevin. Kevin gets like so many like requests. He can pick and choose. I get not so many requests, but I'm happy, much happier. And you know what? You know, the Greek, there is a, I think is a, I don't know whether it's Euclid. You know, he was asked by a young man. He said, I know this girl, and I think I love her. What do you suggest? Should I marry her or not? He told him, you do whatever you want, because you will. I have no regret. So, and because I have only like one choice, not too many girls, one.
I like that. What comes across through from the film through Taher's performance is this incredible strength of spirit that you have, and you know, and I'm getting the chance to talk to you today, and you have this wonderful smile that, you know, you have a physical reaction to when you meet you. It's incredible. The strength of a smile, the power of a smile can be incredible. Is that something you've always had? You've always had this kind of inner strength, because to get through what you got through, and to come out of it the other side with this incredible positivity to life, and this, you know, glass half full attitude to life is such an inspiration. But is it always something that you've had, the strength of spirit?
Yeah, I did. You know what Kevin didn't tell you, that there is a lot of material he had to leave out because there is no space, you know. But in my life as a child, I went through a lot of poverty and pain,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I mean, this is like very hard, like to explain to Edith, like a young girl from Wales, I presume, or Scotland,
Yes.
who like lives. Yeah, alhamdulillah. Good for
You're
you.
surrounded by Scots, Mohamedou. We've got you on both sides, basically.
And you're lucky because Nancy is not here. Because you know the first comment she would make? Sorry, I didn't understand you. Could you please repeat the question?
We normally come with subtitles wherever we go. That's the thing, you see.
Yeah, you're lucky. So, you know, like Edith, I used to go to school without shoes. You know how hard that is in Mauritania, scorching heat, and I used to run from one building to the other, one structure, tree or building, to cool down my feet and continue on my way, you know. And then I used to wake up in the night because of the heat, and then have like horrible nightmares, you know. And we use like, you know, it's not like we have choice. We only have like one meal, almost one meal a day, and that's, you know, very like simple, you know. And so from that life, and when I was taken in that plane from Jordan to Guantanamo Bay, USA plane, I was thinking I will never see the light of the day again. And one thing I regretted at that moment, every bad thing I said to someone, every hurt I caused to anyone. I didn't regret like that I didn't have money. I didn't regret that I didn't have good clothes. I didn't regret that I didn't have the most beautiful girl in the world. No, none of that. I only regretted I should have been better to all people. You know, gave me a new philosophy. Be nice to everyone all the time.
Yeah. Kevin, I can absolutely see why meeting Mohamedou for, you know, even on Skype would be the thing that would go, yeah, I want to tell this story. Because yeah, an incredible individual, incredible human being. But then when you were saying, you kind of, you know, the book didn't kind of shout out its, you know, of how to tell it as a film. Can you talk a little bit about that journey in terms of the, you know, the drafts of the scripts that you went through and the forms that it took? Because the structure of the film is, and the way that you've chosen to structure it, and it I think just that is something that adds to the power of the film and the emotion that you know, the connection that you have as a film fan watching it.
Well, I mean, first of all, Mohamedou is absolutely right that the hardest thing about making this film was that there's so much in his story. There's a mini series, you know, there's a trilogy of movies, and that was really the hardest thing, was figuring out, because movies are simple, you know, as we all know, they've got to tell a simple story. They've got 2 hours. If you try and put too much in, if they're too complicated, if the focus isn't there on a few relationships, they don't work as movies. And the force of movies is in their emotional power. You know, when they work, it's because they affect you, and they you know, they put you into somebody else's shoes. But you can't do that unless you know, spend time on those few simple relationships. So the struggle with the script was always, how do we get a sense of who Mohamedou is, of the world that he's from, of why he's in prison, at the same time as, you know, not you know, telling the whole history of Europe and North Africa in you know, in a single movie. So that was really the struggle. And we started off, when I got involved, there was a script written by a guy called Michael Bronner, who had gone to Mauritania and met Mohamedou, and he had done a great job of sort of telling, adapting the book, but telling Mohamedou's life story really as well within it. But the issue with the script was that it kind of didn't have a story. It was just, you know, everything put in.
Yeah.
He's a journalist, Michael, so that was his, you know, he wanted to reflect the truth as he saw it. And it was probably about 180, 200 pages. and sort of hadn't made those hard choices. And I think that was the thing about this story, is we had to make a lot of very hard choices, and do a lot of simplification of things, which you always have to do when you're telling a true story. But in this case, it was just, even more so than normal. And then a couple of other writers had a go with me at different approaches, different ways of, taking the material that Michael had, and that was always the basis of it, what he had produced, and trying to sort of shape a story, a simple narrative. But we always felt like, this is too simplistic, or this doesn't have enough drama, or whatever. And actually, it was the fourth writer who came on board, who were actually a pair of writers called Rory and Sorab, and who live in America, but one of them is Iranian American and the other one is British American. And they had, I suppose, in a helpful way, they knew less of the reality of the story. They did talk to Mohamedu, they talked to Nancy, they talked to Stuart Couch, Benedict Cumberbatch's character, but they're kind of professional guys who are kind of like, going from one project to another project. They didn't have maybe the emotional connection. And that was actually turned out to be the best thing, because they were able to see it in a more objective way. And all the things that I'd been hanging on to, saying, oh no, we need to have this, we need to have it. They were like, no, clear the furniture. Here's a structure that works. And that was really, them sort of coming in with tough love, and sort of, clearing the furniture aside and saying, this is the line of sight. That was really the turning point in making the film work. And really what they did was a couple of things. One was they said, we don't want to know for sure that Mohamedu is a lovely guy right from the beginning, and we don't want to know that he's innocent from the beginning. Otherwise, all the tension has gone. And that sounds like a simple and obvious thing, but of course, what that leads to is that it leads to a sort of a thriller structure, I suppose. It leads to something where you are somewhat, at least for the first half of the movie, you're wondering about this guy. You're wondering, who is he? Can we trust what he says? And that gives you some narrative momentum. And I think that the other thing that they managed to do was they managed to find, because I'd always felt that if we made the whole movie in Guantanamo, we would reduce our audience by 4/5. And a big part of making this movie was to tell a story of the war on terror, a story of Guantanamo that reached a wide audience, that would actually talk to people who are not already the tiny minority of people who all know about this stuff, who are part of the kind of liberal elite, to actually try and reach people who watch a movie with Jodie Foster and Benedict Cumberbatch in it, because that feels like those are the people whose opinions and minds we need to change. So I felt that if we set it all in Guantanamo, it would be so sad and grim and difficult, and that actually that would reduce our audience so massively. So I always wanted to tell an American story alongside the Guantanamo story, the story of the lawyers and the story of the kind of the bigger picture of the rule of law and how American law worked and how they're trying to deal with this situation. So what the writers managed to figure out, these Rory and Sarah managed to figure out, was that if we gave Nancy, the lawyer, a journey, then her role would actually feel like it had some emotional content. Up to that point, she had just been a lawyer who turns up and talks to Mohamedu and he tells the story. And there was no kind of real narrative progression to it. There was no change. And, that movies and movie characters require change, to really work, I think. It's one of the golden rules. Somebody needs to be different at the end than they were at the beginning. In some way, it can be quite subtle, but you need to see a shift in who people are. And, they managed to figure out how to make Nancy change.
It's interesting because you talk about those kind of subtle changes, and I talked about, the Tahar's performance and the strength of character that he shows in that performance. But with the torture sequence within the film, which is in terms of the physical reaction that you have watching it, it's really, really powerful. Really, I mean, it's really uncomfortable to watch, you know. And in terms of constructing that and working out how you would film that, was that something that took a bit of time to get the right texture of it and make sure that it was, you knew what it wanted to be and the reaction that it would have as well, and from watching it?
Absolutely. That took it. That was probably the thing we talked about more than anything else. Once we had this structure to the story and a way to feel like we can make this work as a movie, then the most discussion was about how do we show the horrific torture that was meted out to Mohamedu, and how do we show it in a way that's not going to make an audience just turn off their TV or walk out of the cinema, and that show, but still shows authentically as much as it can what Mohamedu went through. Because if you don't know what he went through, you know, the whole story kind of doesn't make any sense, and the whole you know, it's the ticking time, it's the bomb that's ticking all the way through the story. You know you're going to get there, but you don't quite know what it's going to be like when the bomb goes off. So we also decided, or I talked a lot with the DP of Alvin Kukler about the idea that, you know, this is a very talky film. It's got a lot of people just sitting in tiny rooms talking to each other, but that there was a moment here with the torture sequence where we could move into a more cinematic world, be more visceral, more immediately emotional in its effect on the audience. And so you have this 15-minute sequence, which is really kind of becomes a kind of fever dream of visual and oral storytelling rather than words telling the story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's obviously one of my big regrets, about, just as an aside, about not being able to show this film on the big screen, because I think on the big screen, that sort of cinematic moment has, you know, that's where it really, really works and affects you. But we made the decision also that, unlike other films that have been made about torture and the war on terror, things like Zero Dark 30, where you are always on the outside, on the kind of American point of view, looking at people's bodies being hit and beaten, and that we wanted to go inside Mohamedou's head as much as we tried to give some psychological sense of what's happening in your head if this occurs to you. And in the book, Mohamedou writes very beautifully about how he sort of hallucinated that his mother was in his cell. He thought himself back in Mauritania at certain points, and how mixed up and confused his mind became. So that became a kind of touchstone. Let's take that idea of hallucinatory experience and make that the way that we see the torture, so that it's cinematic, it's impactful, but it's not totally literal. It's not you objectively watching horrific things being done to somebody. You're more inside their head, feeling what that must be like.
Mohamedu, did you go on set at all? Were you there when for any of the filming?
Yes, I did. So I just want to say something, you know, before I forget. Sign of a good. I finished the book. I want more. I want more of the same, or I want more of the same author. And a movie, when I finish, I start researching and I want to know more. That's the sign of a good movie. This is exactly what happened. And Kevin is talking about like what he had to leave out. He had to make very hard choices. You know, so many people ask me when there is a sequel, what they can make more about the story. And so, and I'm having people from everywhere, you know, because of, you know, I post on different languages. And so people from Russia, from Saudi Arabia, from the Gulf states, from Africa, from Europe, a lot of them, from North America, and from Mexico and Latin America, because this is very common thing that people suffer. People suffer from a lot of stuff, depression, for instance, you know. And when they see something like this, is very uplifting to them that, you know, you could like recover from a very bad experience. And when I went to the set, it was like eerily similar to Guantanamo Bay. And you can check this, Edith, for yourself. You can just Google real picture from Guantanamo Bay and just compare them to the movie. You see, it's the same.
That must have
And
been terrifying for you, or what was
yes,
that? How did, yeah.
I was very scared, and I just pretended to be cool and everything because I didn't want to make a fool of myself. And then I sat there, and then they took to the set, and
Yeah.
then they give me like this headset,
Yeah.
and but I didn't want to hear. I just like slid them a little bit
Hmm.
down so I don't hear anything, and then I closed my eyes because I didn't want to see anything. And it's
Um,
all like horrible. Like I tell you a story that happened on the set. So when they were doing the scene, when they were taking us off the plane, when we were being transported, one of the actors, he freaked out. He excused himself. He said he's not going to. It's amazing that the same feeling happened to me because I'm claustrophobic, and I almost died of suffocation. Except I didn't have a choice to sign out. I had to stay
yeah.
there.
Um, how do you think Tahar did? How do you think his performance is? How did he do you? Did he do you justice? I mean, I think his performance is extraordinary.
So I don't think I'm in a position to judge an actor because I'm not a critic, and and I don't know how I act. I don't know how I look to you. I don't know how I look to Kevin.
Hmm.
You know, and but I know how you look. I know how Kevin look. But ironically, I don't know how I look. So and Taha Rahim is. I mean, he's a very good actor. Taha Rahim is a very good actor. Before the Mauritanian, he was a good actor. I saw A Prophet
Hmm.
and I saw The Looming Tower, and he's good. He's better looking, and he's more muscular. And I put him on my profile when I go on dating site. I put him on my profile. Says with this guy. They
Oh.
said that's me.
Kevin, how was it? Was it an easy choice in terms of finding who you wanted to play Mohamedu?
Well, obviously it was the key choice
Yeah.
in making the film, and there really only was one person in mind. I mean, right from the very beginning, from that very first time I spoke to Mohamedu, I know Tahar. We're friends. We'd worked together before a decade ago, and I phoned him up pretty much immediately after our first contact, and said, "I've got this great role for you." And he read the script when we had it ready, or even when we didn't have it ready. He read it, and we worked on it together off and on for a couple of years. And the money was very hard to get for this film, as you can imagine. It's not the most
Yeah.
commercial prospect, so it was really hard to get the money together. And so he kept sort of delaying jobs he was meant to be doing, and then for us, and then the movie wouldn't happen, and I'd feel really guilty, and he'd say, no, we're going to stick with this, So in the end, there was one time when I thought he isn't going to be able to do the movie. Actually, he went off to do The Serpent, which is that BBC show, which people might have seen recently.
Yeah.
And it was such a long shoot in Thailand and whatever, and it looked like it was going to conflict with ours. When finally we looked like we had the money, and oh my God, Tahar's not available. And I started looking around for other actors, and I just couldn't find anyone, and who was not just someone who was of Arabic origin, who spoke English, but also just somebody more deeply than that, somebody who had the same spirit as Mohamedu, and who is the quality of actor that had the depth that Tahar has. So I mean, I should just, as a little aside for those who don't know, but Tahar and I met just after he had done his breakout performance in a Prophet,
Mm-hmm.
Jacques Audiard film in 2009. And I saw that film, and I was doing a film which was at that time called The Eagle, about Roman legionaries going across Hadrian's Wall into a wild and misty Scotland and being just, being killed by the savages. And the chief savage was we called him the Seal King, or the Seal Prince, and he was going to speak Gaelic. And so not English. So I thought, we can have Tahar Rahim. He can come. He doesn't speak any English. At that time, he didn't speak English. He can come and he can play the seal prince, which he did. He shaved his head.
Mm-hmm.
He's got sort of Mohican in it, and he wears seal skin. And it couldn't be a more different film. Anyway, from doing that, I speak terrible French. He spoke terrible English, but we became friends, and we continued to see each other over the years. And his English got better and better. My French got worse and worse. And but yes, so that's how I knew right away that he was the man to do this, and it was just really good fortune. And I remember. Well, first of all, I should say that his commitment to it through these 2 years of ups and downs was incredible, because he connected to this on a level which I think was much more than just, oh, here's a great part for me to play. He felt a huge responsibility, I think, in terms of the way that the world is going to see this character in particular, but also people who are accused of terrorism in general. And he felt there was a huge weight of responsibility as a Muslim man. And so when he got to set, he was very nervous, actually, and he's not normally a nervous kind of guy. And because Jodie Foster was ill after Christmas, we had to rearrange all the schedule at the last minute, because she couldn't come back from LA. And Tahar had to do his last speech, the speech in the courtroom. He had to do that speech as his very first thing on the very first day, and which is a disaster for any actor to do the thing that is meant to be the culmination of your journey.
Wow.
To do that first is it's really difficult. So so he showed up. He was very nervous. He had 10 coffees, as he normally does. He's not eating anything because he's trying to lose weight. Drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes in a very French way. And he did the first take of that speech, and the DP and I looked at each other, and had tears in our eyes. We thought he'd done such a beautiful job. And at that moment, I thought, okay, the movie's going to work, because his performance is going to work, and that's going to bring it all alive. So that was like the moment where I thought, because you're never quite sure when you're making a movie.
Yeah.
Is it a disaster? Does this work? These performances, I don't know. But that was a moment sort of halfway through the shooting of the film, when he turned up and started his part of the film. I thought, okay, this is going to work, because he's going to be yes, exactly.
Well, listen, I've been talking too much. We've got some great questions. Mohamedu, you've been very busy answering lots of people's questions on your on your own, which is amazing. I might repeat some of them just so everybody can hear your answers. But there's some great ones coming in. Just on the casting thing, Nina Gold, I believe, did the casting. This is from an anonymous attendee. How was the process? You've talked about obviously the character of Mohamedu, but they also ask, was Mohamedu involved at all in the casting at all?
Nina Gold is a great daughter rather of Wales, and the best casting director in the world. And we were very lucky to have her. I've worked with her a few times, and she's got this amazing instinct, which is, I guess, what you need as a casting director, is just to think, when you read a script, go, oh, that's the person who can bring out that particular aspect of this character that's going to really, really work. And she and I, once the script was ready, we were talking about who is going to play Nancy Hollander, and there's very few. We needed somebody who was a name, who brought some money with them, and there's a very short list of women in their late 50s and 60s who do that. And we went through not right. And then she went off to LA, as she does, to some awards ceremony or something. And she went to a party, and she saw Jodie Foster there. It was somebody's birthday party. Jodie Foster there. And she phoned me up excitedly, literally in the middle of the night, and said, oh my God, I just saw Jodie Foster. She is so perfect, and I've got this feeling about her. And I said, she's never going to say yes. Jodie doesn't do anything. You know, she's so picky. And she said, no, I've just got a feeling. And we sent the script. 3 days later, Jodie emailed back, said, oh, let's talk about this. This is interesting. So yeah, she was absolutely instrumental. Mohamedu was involved in the casting, in particular with all his family members. So all the Mauritanian sections of the film. His nephew plays him as a young boy.
Amazing.
Incredibly sweet. A lot of his family were at the wedding. He advised us to cast, Mohamedu advised us to cast the chief of police, Dadahi, who arrests him, who's actually a wonderful actor. And I think he's head of the TV in Mauritania, is that right? He's got quite a big job, hasn't he, Mohamedu? What did the guy who plays Dadahi, what's his job?
He's very known in Mauritania. He's very big.
Okay.
You know,
so Mohamedu Ould went out to Mauritania and met with lots of people, a lot of Mohamedu's relatives, a lot of the actors who are there. There isn't a lot of professional actors in the country. There's a few soap operas that happen, I think, on TV. There have been a couple of films made there by a Malian Mauritanian director called Sissako, who's done some really beautiful films there. If anyone's interested in seeing more of Mauritania on screen, I recommend those movies. Abdelaram Sissako, is that how you say his name? I'm not sure how you say his name.
Yes.
And but anyway, he's a brilliant director. So yeah, that was the involvement that Mohamedu had mostly, was with the Mauritanian casting, and also teaching Tahar to speak in Mauritanian version of Arabic, which is very different than normal Arabic, very different than Algerian, which is what Tahar speaks. So he was his tutor, weren't you?
Wow. That's brilliant. An anonymous attendee, you've already answered this on on your typing this out, Mohamedu, but it'd be lovely to get your answer, because I think it's such an important point to bring up. For Mohamedu, with Guantanamo still being open, what can we do to change that, make an impact on these human rights violations?
What you can do, like, it's so easy, especially that you live in a democracy and the government is supposed to listen to you. You know, this like a holy relationship with the United States, you must not be like unconditional. Like, if the United States does something wrong, you go along. You know, the Chilcot report, the Iraq inquiry, they found out that the United Kingdom went along with the war, you know, against the interests of the United Kingdom, knowingly against the interests. You know, they found out that whenever the United States says jump, the United Kingdom answer is how high. It's not good for the state, mostly not UK, and not good for the world, because we need the United Kingdom to be a positive force for freedom, for human rights violation. You know, and I can tell you from personal like opinion, from personal experience that Kevin knows about, that for more than 1 year, I am applying for a visa to visit the United Kingdom, and they refuse me every time, because they just, you know, we know that they have report, you know, they have letters from the United States urging them not to allow me in. And this is like even against the like official position of the United Kingdom, that is against torture, against Guantanamo Bay, standing with torture survivor. And we know that because we have this on record, you know. We know on record that at least since 2005, the United States, that we know that because we have it black on white, you know, from my former prosecutor, you know, and and this must be more, like, we must, you know, make more pressure to close Guantanamo Bay, because if you choose like you know, to be like the closest ally to the United States, you need also to have some say, you know. And so far,
Yeah.
you have no say, you know, absolutely none whatsoever.
I think that that's one of the many reasons why this film is incredibly important, you know, in terms of telling your story, Mohamedu, on a platform like this, is a way of kind of reiterating how much we need to do and how much needs to be done. I want to ask one quick thing before we run out of time. Mohamedu, I want to know what you're writing next, please.
So I have a book that is out last month, Ahmed and Zarga. Yeah, I'm making a little bit advertisement for myself,
Quite right.
self-promotion. Yeah, I know. It's a short novel about the Bedouin life in Mauritania, you know, where I grew up, and I'm having a short story published. I don't know the name of the publisher, sorry.
That's
But
okay.
it's very big publisher, I promise.
We can follow you on Twitter and Facebook to find out about it. But I'm glad to see that you are.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes.
I'm glad, you know,
And
as Kevin says, you know,
I
as Kevin says, you know, you're a born writer. So I hope that that's something that we continue to see you do and share your stories. And I'm so glad that you allowed your story to be told in this way, because it's an incredible film. And Kevin, you've done an extraordinary job with this. I think it's a fantastic piece of work. Thanks to everybody for your questions. Mohamedu, it's a real treat to get to meet you and talk to you. Thank you so much. And Kevin, thank you as well. Take care, folks. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye. That was really fun.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Love you guys.
Bye, guys.